I never thought I'd be standing in a luxury hotel garage at 11:30 p.m., holding my overnight bag while my son explained that there had been a booking issue with my room. Blake's voice was apologetic, but his eyes never quite met mine as he gestured toward an air mattress set up between his fiancée's vintage Porsche and a row of maintenance equipment. "It's just for tonight, Mom. Vanessa's family needed the extra suite for her cousins who flew in from Switzerland. We'll figure something else out tomorrow." I glanced at the small desk fan placed beside the makeshift bed, then at the laminated sign on the wall that read, "Harrington Grand Resort and Spa, employee parking only." Tadiin tigisun. The irony wasn't lost on me. What Blake didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just Margaret Sullivan, the simple mother of the groom. I was Margaret Sullivan, majority shareholder of Sullivan Hospitality Group, the parent company that had acquired the Harrington Grand 3 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But that revelation would have to wait. For now, I simply smiled, set down my bag, and said, "Of course, dear. Whatever helps make Vanessa's perfect week happen." The garage door hummed closed behind him as he hurried back to the welcome dinner I hadn't been invited to attend. I sat down on the edge of the air mattress, feeling it sink beneath my weight, and thought about how I had arrived at this moment, being treated like an inconvenience at a property I partially owned, by the son I had given everything to raise. I had always prided myself on being practical. When my husband Thomas died unexpectedly of a heart attack 22 years ago, I was left with a 7-year-old son, a modest life insurance policy, and the small but promising corporate housing company Thomas and I had started together. Most people expected me to sell the business and find something more suitable for a widow with a child. Instead, I threw myself into making Sullivan Corporate Housing work, learning every aspect of the business while still making it home for dinner with Blake most nights. Those early years were difficult, but precious. Blake and I became a team, eating macaroni and cheese on the living room floor while I reviewed contracts, him doing homework at my office on weekends. I'd pin his artwork next to financial projections on my office wall. My assistant Elaine would bring him cookies while he read books in the conference room after school. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough, and more importantly, we had each other. The business grew slowly, but steadily. By the time Blake was in high school, Sullivan Corporate Housing had expanded into 3 states, providing extended stay accommodations for relocating executives. I never remarried, not for lack of opportunity, but because I found purpose in my work and joy in raising my son. Blake was my priority, my reason for pushing through 12-hour workdays and sleepless nights worrying about payroll. I wanted him to have opportunities I never had, to pursue his passions without financial constraints, and Blake was worth it. He was a bright, thoughtful boy who grew into a determined young man. He excelled academically, played lacrosse, joined the debate team. When he was accepted to Wharton on a partial scholarship, I cried with pride, then quietly liquidated some assets to cover the remaining tuition. I never told him about that part. I wanted him to feel he'd earned his place entirely on merit, which he largely had. I just filled in the financial gaps without fanfare. College marked the beginning of changes in our relationship. Blake came home less frequently, absorbed in his new world of ambitious peers and prestigious internships. When he did visit, he'd bring friends whose parents owned vacation homes in the Hamptons or Aspen. I noticed a slight shift in how he described me to them, emphasizing that I was self-made and had built something from nothing rather than simply introducing me as his mom who ran a corporate housing company. I didn't mind. In fact, I felt proud that he saw my accomplishments as noteworthy. What I didn't realize then was that this was the first sign of Blake beginning to see me through the lens of others' expectations rather than through his own eyes. After graduation, Blake landed a job at an investment firm in Manhattan. Meanwhile, Sullivan Corporate Housing had grown significantly. I had carefully expanded into boutique hotels, focusing on properties that catered to extended business travel. The work consumed me, but in the best possible way. I loved the challenge, the constant learning, the satisfaction of building something substantial. In 2017, we rebranded as Sullivan Hospitality Group and acquired our first luxury property, a small but exquisite hotel in Boston. By 2020, despite the pandemic's impact on the travel industry, we had weathered the storm better than most, thanks to our diverse portfolio and the long-term corporate contracts that had always been our foundation. When opportunity arose to acquire the struggling but prestigious Harrington Hotels chain in 2021, I took the calculated risk. It paid off beyond my expectations. Throughout this evolution, I maintained my practical approach to life. I still lived in the same comfortable but modest home where Blake grew up. I drove a reliable sedan rather than something flashy. My one indulgence was quality clothing, well-made, classic pieces that lasted for years. I believed in investing in things that endured, whether business assets or wardrobe staples. Perhaps that's why Blake's fiancée Vanessa had seemed unimpressed. When we first met 3 years ago, Blake brought her home for Thanksgiving, clearly anxious for us to connect. Vanessa Morgan was undeniably beautiful, tall, polished, with the kind of confident poise that comes from never having to question your place in the world. She was a marketing executive at a luxury skincare brand, the daughter of a well-known surgeon and a former model turned philanthropist. "Your home is so quaint," she'd said, running a manicured finger along my dining room table. The same solid oak piece where Blake had done his homework for years. "It has such character, like something from a simpler time." I'd smiled and thanked her, choosing to take the comment at face value rather than detecting any condescension. Over pumpkin pie, she'd asked about my business with what seemed like genuine interest, but I noticed how her expression shifted when I mentioned corporate housing. "Oh, like extended stay hotels? How practical," she'd said, in the same tone one might use to describe sensible shoes. "Blake mentioned you were in real estate, so I pictured something more. Premium." Blake had jumped in quickly. "Mom's company has evolved a lot. They're working with some really impressive clients now." He'd squeezed my hand under the table, an old signal between us that meant, just go with it. So I had, downplaying the full scope of Sullivan Hospitality Group's current operations and focusing instead on asking about Vanessa's work and family. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Later, after she'd gone to bed in our guest room, Blake had sat with me in the kitchen. "She's just used to a different lifestyle, Mom," he'd explained in a hushed voice. "Her parents' home was featured in Architectural Digest. Try not to take it personally if she seems a little underwhelmed." "Blake," I'd said gently, "I'm not offended. My worth isn't determined by the square footage of my house or the brand of my car." He'd looked relieved but slightly embarrassed. "I know. It's just, things are getting serious with Vanessa, and I want her to see how amazing you are." I'd patted his hand. "If she loves you, she'll see me through your eyes. And if she doesn't, then no amount of impressive real estate will change that." He'd nodded, but I could see something troubling in his expression. A worry that perhaps she wouldn't see what he saw in me, that I might not measure up to her expectations. It was the first time I realized my son might be ashamed of aspects of his upbringing, of me. As their relationship progressed, I saw Blake less and less. Our Sunday phone calls became monthly catch-ups. When I did see him, Vanessa was usually present, steering conversations toward topics that highlighted her connections and experiences: charity galas, mutual friends with minor celebrities, the exclusive neighborhoods where they were house hunting. I tried to build a relationship with her, sending thoughtful gifts for her birthday and Christmas, inviting them for weekends, suggesting lunch when I had meetings in the city. Most of these overtures were met with polite but firm deflections. They were too busy. Their calendar was packed with social obligations, perhaps another time. The engagement announcement came via group text. No special call, just a message to friends and family with a photo of the ring, substantial, and the news that they'd be married at the Harrington Grand Resort in the Berkshires. I was simultaneously hurt by the impersonal notification and surprised by the venue choice. The Harrington Grand was one of our most successful properties, a historic resort that had been extensively renovated under my company's direction. I wondered if Blake had chosen it because he knew of my connection, but his follow-up call dispelled that notion. Vanessa fell in love with it when her friend Alessandra got married there last year, he explained. It's exactly the elegant, exclusive vibe she wants. We had to pull some strings to get it. There's a 2-year waiting list, but Vanessa's dad knows someone on their board. I let out a small laugh before I could stop myself. What's funny? Blake asked. Nothing, I said quickly. It sounds wonderful. I'm sure it will be beautiful. I hadn't explicitly told Blake about the Harrington acquisition. In fact, I'd been increasingly vague about work in recent years, sensing that my success made him uncomfortable in some way I couldn't quite understand. Our conversations focused more on his career advancements than mine. When he asked about my work, I kept my answers brief and understated. It was easier that way, less complicated. But now, with his wedding planned at one of my properties, I faced a dilemma. Should I tell him? Would it make things awkward with Vanessa's family, who clearly believed their connections had secured the venue? I decided to wait for the right moment, to find a private time to explain the situation to Blake. That moment never came. The wedding planning whirlwind took over, with Vanessa's mother, Patricia, at the helm. I was copied on emails about color, schemes and floral arrangements, but never asked for input. When I offered to help with the rehearsal dinner, Patricia responded that they had already arranged for the Harrington's executive chef to create a signature experience for their guests. 6 months flew by. I threw myself into work, overseeing the acquisition of 2 more properties and the launch of our new urban residential concept. My team expanded. Board meetings grew longer. Financial projections looked better than ever. Yet amidst this professional success, I felt increasingly disconnected from the one person who had been my primary motivation for decades. A week before the wedding, Blake called. It was the first time we'd spoken directly in nearly a month. Mom, slight change of plans, he began, his voice carrying that forced casual tone I recognized from childhood, the one he used when asking for something he knew might be difficult. We've had some last-minute RSVPs from Vanessa's side, and the resort is at capacity. Would you mind coming up on Thursday instead of Tuesday? It would really help with the room situation. I had planned to arrive early, to spend a little time with Blake before the wedding chaos fully took over. But I heard the strain in his voice, the implicit request to make things easier for him. Of course, I said. Thursday is fine. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. His relief was palpable. I'll send you the updated schedule. Oh, and it's black tie for the rehearsal dinner now. Patricia thought it would elevate the atmosphere. I made the adjustments, rescheduling meetings and packing appropriate attire. I even bought a new dress for the rehearsal dinner, a deep navy column of silk with a subtle beaded detail along the neckline. It was elegant without being flashy, the kind of piece that communicated quiet confidence rather than a need for attention. Thursday arrived. I drove myself to the Berkshires, enjoying the winding roads and lush summer greenery. The Harrington Grand appeared through the trees exactly as I remembered from my last visit during the renovation. Stately, historic, with impeccable grounds. I felt a flutter of pride seeing the subtle improvements my team had implemented. The restored fountain in the circular drive, the refreshed facade that preserved the original architectural details while feeling thoroughly contemporary. As I pulled up to the entrance, I recognized Marcus, the general manager supervising the valet team. His eyes widened slightly as he spotted my car. "Ms. Sullivan," he said as I stepped out, clearly surprised. "We weren't expecting you. Is this an inspection visit?" Before I could answer, Blake appeared, looking harried in a golf shirt and khakis. "Mom, you're early," he said, giving me a quick hug. "We thought you'd be here around 4. "The traffic was lighter than expected," I explained, then turned to Marcus. "No inspection today, Marcus. I'm here as mother of the groom." Marcus looked between Blake and me, confusion evident. "Mr. Sullivan is your son." Blake's brow furrowed. "You two know each other?" I hesitated, but Marcus jumped in smoothly. "Ms. Sullivan visits all our properties periodically. Quality assurance." He gave me a subtle nod, apparently sensing my reluctance to explain further. "Right," I confirmed. "Just part of my job. How are the preparations going, Blake?" "Honestly, it's a bit crazy. Vanessa's family has taken over. Her mom has the staff running in circles with last-minute changes." He lowered his voice. "Between us, I think the wedding planner is ready to quit." I smiled sympathetically. "Wedding week is always stressful. I'm sure it will all come together beautifully." Blake checked his watch. "I need to get back. Vanessa's having a crisis about the welcome bags. I'll have someone show you to your room." He gestured to a young staff member nearby. "Actually, wait. There's something I need to tell you about the room situation." And that's how, 4 hours later, after an awkward introduction to Vanessa's extended family, who largely ignored me at the welcome reception, an uncomfortable conversation with Patricia, who criticized my choice to drive myself rather than hiring a car service, and a tense moment when I overheard Vanessa telling her bridesmaids that my navy dress was trying too hard to be sophisticated, I found myself being escorted to the garage by my son. As Blake explained about the booking issue and the need to accommodate Vanessa's Swiss cousins, I maintained my composure. This wasn't the time for confrontation. My son was getting married in 3 days. His priorities were clear, and apparently, I wasn't among them. After Blake left me in the garage, I sat on the edge of the air mattress for a long time, processing what had just happened. The concrete floor was cold beneath my feet as I removed my sensible heels. The distant sounds of laughter and music from the welcome party drifted faintly through the walls. I thought about calling Elaine or one of my other executives, about revealing my identity to the hotel staff and demanding the presidential suite that was always kept available for ownership visits. But what would that accomplish? It would embarrass Blake, create drama during his wedding week, and potentially damage his relationship with his new in-laws. My pride wasn't worth that cost. Instead, I changed into comfortable clothes, pulled a novel from my overnight bag, and settled onto the air mattress with as much dignity as I could muster. The garage was clean at least, and the small desk fan provided some relief from the stuffiness. I'd slept in worse conditions in the early days of building the business, when I'd sometimes crash on office couches rather than driving home late at night. As I tried to focus on my book, my phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. "How's the mother of the groom experience going? Are they treating you like royalty at the Harrington?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. The truth was too painful, too complicated to explain in a text. Finally, I wrote back, "It's certainly an experience. We'll fill you in later." I set my phone aside and looked around at my surroundings. The concrete walls, the luxury cars, the makeshift bed. In the soft glow of the single lamp I'd been provided, I could see a small spider building a web in the corner near the ceiling. Methodical, patient, creating something intricate and strong from seemingly nothing, like I had done, like I was still doing. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the sacrifices, the late nights, the missed vacations, all to provide for Blake, to build something meaningful that could sustain us. I thought about how I had downplayed my accomplishments to make him comfortable, how I had stepped back when Vanessa entered his life. how I had shrunk myself to fit into the narrow space they seemed willing to allocate to me. And for what? To end up on an air mattress in a garage, while strangers occupied rooms in a hotel that existed, in part, because of my vision and determination. Something shifted inside me then, a quiet but fundamental realignment. I had spent years being accommodating, being understanding, being just mom rather than Margaret Sullivan, business owner and executive. I had hidden parts of myself to avoid making my son uncomfortable, but where had that gotten me? The revelation wasn't dramatic. There was no anger, no tears, just a calm clarity washing over me like a gentle wave. I deserved better than this. Not because I owned the hotel chain, but because I was a human being worthy of basic respect and consideration. Because I was a mother who had given everything to her child. Because I had earned my place in this world through honest work and perseverance. As I finally drifted off to sleep, lulled by the hum of the fan and the distant mechanical sounds of the building's systems, I made a decision. I wouldn't cause a scene. I wouldn't embarrass Blake. But I also wouldn't continue to make myself small. It was time for Margaret Sullivan, all of her, to stand tall again. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, the woman who had built an empire from a small corporate housing company would begin to emerge from the shadows. Not with drama or revenge, but with quiet dignity and self-respect. I just didn't know yet exactly what form that emergence would take. I woke to the sound of car doors slamming. Blinking in the harsh fluorescent garage lighting, I checked my watch. 6:15 a.m. Through bleary eyes, I watched hotel staff arriving for the morning shift, their expressions a mix of confusion and sympathy as they noticed me on the air mattress between the vehicles. A young woman in a housekeeping uniform paused, then approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need assistance?" I sat up, smoothing my rumpled clothes and attempting to salvage some dignity. "I'm fine, thank you. Just a room situation. I'm with the Sullivan Morgan wedding party." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Oh, you're Mr. Sullivan's mother? I'm Carmen. I'm so sorry about this. Would you like me to bring you some coffee? The staff break room has a decent machine." Her kindness nearly broke my composure. "That would be lovely, Carmen. Thank you." After she left, I gathered my toiletries and changed quickly in the small employee restroom adjacent to the garage. The mirror reflected a woman determined not to look defeated. I applied minimal makeup, styled my hair, and put on a casual but elegant outfit suitable for the family brunch scheduled for 10 a.m. By the time Carmen returned with coffee and a warm croissant from the kitchen, Chef Marcel doesn't know, but you look like you could use it. I was presentable, if not well-rested. "The employee's entrance leads directly to the garden path," she whispered conspiratorially. "You can avoid the main lobby if you'd prefer." I thanked her, oddly touched by this small act of compassion from a stranger when my own son had shown so little. As I sipped the surprisingly good coffee, I considered my options. I could confront Blake immediately about the sleeping arrangements, revealing my connection to the hotel. I could contact Marcus and have the situation rectified within minutes. Or I could wait, observe, and better understand what was happening before deciding how to proceed. I chose the third option. Making my way through the employee's entrance, I emerged onto a stone path winding through immaculately maintained gardens. The morning air was fresh with the scent of roses and freshly cut grass. Guests wouldn't be stirring for hours yet. This peaceful moment belonged to the resort staff and apparently to me. I found a secluded bench overlooking the lake and pulled out my phone. 3 emails from work required immediate attention. A potential acquisition in California, final. Approval on a new property logo, and a staffing issue at our Chicago location. I handled them efficiently, then hesitated before opening my messages. 2 texts from Blake, sent late last night. "Hope the accommodations are okay for tonight. Working on a better solution for tomorrow." And then, an hour later, Actually, Vanessa's aunt and uncle decided to extend their stay through the weekend, so we might need to keep the current arrangement. Sorry, Mom. Hope you understand. No question about my comfort, no genuine concern. Just a notification that I would be spending my son's entire wedding weekend sleeping in a garage, followed by a perfunctory apology. Something cold settled in my stomach, a feeling I recognized from difficult business negotiations. The realization that the other party does not value your position or respect your worth. I put the phone away without responding and watched the sun rise fully over the lake. 22 years of single motherhood. 22 years of prioritizing Blake's needs, his education, his comfort, his future. 22 years of building a business that could secure that future. And now, I was an inconvenience to be stored away, out of sight of the important wedding guests. At 8:30, I made my way to the main building. The lobby was beginning to fill with wedding guests enjoying coffee and breakfast pastries. I spotted Marcus speaking with the front desk staff and caught his eye. He immediately broke away and approached me. "Miss Sullivan, about last night?" I raised a hand to stop him. "It's all right, Marcus. I'd prefer to handle this situation discreetly for now." He looked uncomfortable. "With all due respect, ma'am, it's not all right. We have strict protocols about ownership visits and putting you in the garage if the board found out." "The board won't find out from me," I assured him. "Consider this an undercover assessment of operations. I'm just gathering information." "At minimum, let me arrange proper accommodations," he insisted. "The lakeside suite is available. Mrs. Morgan was told it was reserved, but it's actually kept open for emergency situations or VIP guests." "Mrs. Morgan?" "The mother of the bride. She's been quite involved in managing the room assignments." So it wasn't just Blake or Vanessa, but Patricia who had orchestrated my garage accommodations. Interesting. "Thank you, but no," I decided. "For now, I'd like to continue as planned. But I would appreciate if you could have someone move my suitcase from my car to somewhere more secure than the garage floor, and perhaps provide access to a proper shower?" Marcus nodded, clearly still troubled but respecting my wishes. "The executive staff locker room is at your disposal. I'll have your belongings moved there immediately. And Ms. Sullivan, just say the word, and I can have the presidential suite prepared within the hour." I thanked him and moved toward the breakfast buffet, where I filled a plate with fruit and a small scone. Finding an empty table by the window, I sat alone, observing the other guests. Most were Vanessa's family and friends. I recognized faces from photos Blake had shared, or from brief introductions at the welcome reception. They clustered in animated groups, many still in designer loungewear, gesturing with manicured hands and laughing a bit too loudly. None acknowledged me, though several glanced my way with vague curiosity before returning to their conversations. I was clearly not part of their circle, not someone worth approaching or including. For a moment, I felt a flash of my teenage self, the scholarship student at an elite school, wearing discount department store clothes while classmates displayed their European labels. I had overcome that insecurity decades ago through achievement and inner confidence. How strange to feel its shadow again now, at 62, as a successful businesswoman. At precisely 9:45, Blake appeared in the lobby, looking harried. He scanned the room and, spotting me, hurried over. "Mom, there you are. Listen, slight change of plans. The family brunch is actually just for Vanessa's immediate family and the wedding party now. Patricia decided it would be more intimate that way." "I see." I set down my teacup carefully. "And where would you like me to be instead?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "There's a nice cafe in town, about 10 minutes away. Or you could explore the grounds. The gardens are supposed to be amazing." He lowered his voice. "It's just for a couple of hours. Then we have the afternoon free before the rehearsal dinner tonight." "And am I still invited to the rehearsal dinner?" I kept my tone neutral, genuinely curious about where I stood in the hierarchy of events. "Of course," He seemed shocked I would ask. "You're my mother. You're walking me down the aisle." That, at least, was something. I hadn't been replaced in that fundamental role. "Then I'll see you this evening," I said, rising from my chair. "Enjoy your brunch." "Mom." He reached for my arm, then dropped his hand. "Thanks for being so understanding. Things are just complicated with Vanessa's family. They have certain expectations." "Don't worry, Blake. I understand completely." And I did, though perhaps not in the way he meant. I spent the morning exploring the property I legally owned but had never experienced as a guest. The Harrington Grand was even more impressive than the reports and photos suggested. The historic main building had been painstakingly restored, with original woodwork gleaming alongside modern amenities. The newer wings blended seamlessly with the old architecture. Gardens, pools, tennis courts, and hiking trails provided varied recreation options. The spa, which my team had completely renovated last year, was booked solid with wedding guests enjoying pre-ceremony pampering. Around noon, I found myself near the boathouse. A group was preparing to take out the resort's vintage wooden motorboats, another of my additions to the property amenities. As I watched, I recognized Vanessa's father, Dr. Morgan, helping his wife into one of the craft. Patricia was complaining loudly about the lack of shade on the vessel. "These boats are lovely but so impractical," she declared to anyone listening. "If I owned this place, I'd add canopies immediately. It's a liability waiting to happen. Guests getting sunstroke on the lake." I smiled to myself. The boats had been deliberately restored to their original 1930s condition, without modern additions that would compromise their historic authenticity. We had specifically chosen not to add canopies after consulting with 3 separate historical preservation experts. "Excuse me," a voice came from behind me. I turned to find an elderly woman with elegantly coiffed silver hair and shrewd eyes studying me. "You're Blake's mother, aren't you, Margaret?" "Yes," I confirmed, surprised to be recognized. "And you are Josephine Harrington." She extended a hand adorned with a single stunning sapphire ring. "My family built this place in 1925. Sold it a few years back when the upkeep became too burdensome, but I still visit occasionally. Sentimental reasons." I shook her hand, momentarily speechless. Josephine Harrington was a hospitality legend. My company had purchased the resort from her family's trust, but I had never met her personally during negotiations. "It's an honor. Mrs. Harrington, your family created something truly special here." She nodded, seemingly pleased with my response. "Walk with me, dear. These wedding people are everywhere, and I could use some intelligent conversation." For the next hour, we strolled the grounds while Josephine shared stories of the resort's history, celebrity guests from the golden age of Hollywood, political scandals in the East Wing, the secret passageway from the wine cellar used during Prohibition. She knew every corner, every quirk of the property. "The new owners have done well," she conceded as we circled back toward the main building. "I was skeptical when I heard it had been purchased by a corporate group, but they've maintained the character while making necessary updates. Smart business." "Thank you," I said without thinking. She stopped walking and fixed me with a penetrating gaze. "Ah, you're not just the mother of the groom, are you?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Sullivan Hospitality Group. I'm that Sullivan." Rather than looking impressed, she laughed, a robust, genuine sound. "How delicious. And does your son's fiancé's family know?" "No, neither does my son, actually. I've kept my professional success understated in recent years." "Why on earth would you do that?" She looked genuinely perplexed. I had no simple answer, so I deflected. "It's complicated." She studied me with those shrewd eyes. "Well, it's not my business. But if I've learned anything in 87 years, it's that hiding your light rarely leads to happiness." She patted my arm. Now, I understand there's quite a grand rehearsal. Dinner tonight. I received an invitation as a courtesy to the Harrington name. Will I see you there? Yes, I'll be attending. Excellent. Perhaps we can continue our conversation. I'd like to hear more about your vision for my family's legacy. We parted ways, and I found myself with several hours to fill before the evening's event. Following Marcus's directions, I located the executive staff facilities and was relieved to find my suitcase waiting in a secure locker room. A hot shower and a change of clothes improved my outlook considerably. By mid-afternoon, I had responded to more work emails, taken a call with my CFO about the California acquisition, and was sitting in the resort's library reviewing quarterly projections when Blake found me. "Mom, I've been looking everywhere for you." He seemed genuinely distressed. "Where have you been all day?" "Exploring the property. It's quite impressive." I closed my laptop. "Is everything all right?" He ran a hand through his hair. A gesture, so reminiscent of his father that my heart clenched momentarily. "Not exactly. The photographer wants family photos before the rehearsal dinner, but Vanessa's parents are insisting on separate family shots. They don't want mixed family photos." I see. The implication was clear. "So you'd like me to take separate photos?" "Just for the formal ones," he hurried to explain. "There will be casual shots during the dinner with everyone." I considered my response carefully. This was my son's wedding week. Despite everything, I didn't want to add to his stress or create conflict that would shadow his memories of the event. But I also couldn't continue being erased from the narrative. "I'll do the separate photos," I agreed. "But Blake, we need to have a conversation about expectations and boundaries. This pattern of last-minute changes and exclusions is becoming concerning." "I know, Mom. I'm sorry. It's just, Vanessa's parents are contributing so much financially, and they have strong opinions about how everything should be. After the wedding, things will calm down. I promise." I wasn't convinced, but I nodded. "What time should I be ready for photos?" 5:30 by the Rose Garden. And Mom, thank you for being so patient with all this." After he left, I sat for a long while contemplating our exchange. Blake looked exhausted and trapped, a far cry from the excited groom he should be. This wedding was clearly not bringing out the best in anyone involved, least of all my son. At 5 o'clock, I dressed for the rehearsal dinner in a floor-length gown of deep emerald silk, classic, elegant, and appropriate for the black tie event. My jewelry was minimal, but fine. Diamond stud earrings Thomas had given me for our 5th anniversary and a platinum bracelet I'd bought myself after closing my first major acquisition. I applied makeup carefully, styled my silver-streaked hair in a sophisticated updo, and slipped into heels that were beautiful but comfortable enough for a long evening. The woman in the mirror looked poised, successful, and confident. Exactly who I was in my professional life. Tonight, I decided, I would bring that version of Margaret Sullivan to the event, regardless of how others might want to categorize or diminish me. I arrived at the Rose Garden precisely at 5:30. The setting was admittedly spectacular. Centuries-old roses in full bloom, stone pathways winding between carefully tended beds, a central fountain bubbling gently in the late afternoon sun. The photographer and his assistants were setting up equipment while Vanessa, resplendent in a silver cocktail dress, directed the placement of floral arrangements to enhance the backdrop. She noticed me first, her expression flickering briefly before settling into a polite smile. "Margaret, you're here. We're just finishing some details." "Everything looks beautiful," I said sincerely. The arrangements were tasteful and elegant, if ostentatious. "We had to bring in our own florist," she confided. "The hotel's regular service was pedestrian. Luckily, Mommy knows the most amazing botanical artist from her charity work." I nodded, choosing not to mention that the pedestrian florist was actually an award-winning designer my team had contracted specifically for the Harrington Grand. Over the next half hour, Patricia and Dr. Morgan arrived, followed by Blake. The photographer began with shots of Vanessa's family, multiple combinations of parents, siblings, and the bride-to-be in various poses among the roses. They looked like a luxury brand advertisement, coordinated, polished, and just slightly untouchable. When my turn came, Blake stood somewhat stiffly beside me while the photographer quickly captured a few mother-son images. I could feel Patricia, watching, her gaze assessing and critical. "Maybe one with your boutonnieres pinned on?" the photographer suggested. Patricia stepped forward immediately. "Actually, I think we should save those for tomorrow. Wouldn't want to diminish the special moment." She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You understand, Margaret. Some traditions are sacred." The implication was clear, pinning on my son's boutonniere, a small but meaningful mother of the groom tradition was being taken from me. Blake looked uncomfortable but didn't contradict her. "Of course," I said evenly. "Sacred traditions should be respected." As we walked toward the venue for the rehearsal dinner, a beautifully restored boathouse overlooking the lake, Blake fell into step beside me. "You look really nice, Mom," he said quietly. "Thank you. You look handsome yourself." He did, in his tailored tuxedo and with his father's warm eyes. "Listen, about tomorrow. The getting ready arrangements. The guys are using the West Wing suite, and Vanessa and her bridesmaids have the East Wing suite." He hesitated. "I wanted to see if you'd like to get ready with us, the groomsmen and me. But Jason's parents are going to be there, and space is limited." Jason was his best friend since college. I had met his parents exactly twice. "What are you suggesting, Blake?" I asked directly. "The hotel has a smaller ready room they've offered. It's nice, has everything you'd need to prepare. I thought, maybe that would work for you? Alone?" He looked pained. "It's just for a couple of hours before the ceremony. First the garage, then exclusion from the family brunch, separate photos, the boutonniere tradition erased, and now banishment during the pre-wedding preparation. Each individual slight might be explained away, but together they formed an unmistakable pattern." "Blake," I said, stopping on the path, "do you want me at this wedding?" "Mom, of course I do. How can you even ask that?" He seemed genuinely shocked. Because every decision, every arrangement seems designed to minimize my presence, to push me to the periphery of this event. I'm sleeping in a garage, excluded from family gatherings, and now you're suggesting I prepare for my only child's wedding, alone in a side room while relative strangers occupy the family suite. His face flushed. "That's not fair. There are logistics involved. Vanessa's family is larger, they've contributed substantially to the costs, and they have certain expectations about how things should be done. And what about your expectations? What about honoring the person who raised you alone for 22 years? You're making this about you," he said, voice rising slightly. "This wedding is about Vanessa and me, our future together." "No, Blake. A marriage is about your future together. A wedding is about families joining, about honoring the past as well as celebrating what's to come. At least, that's what I always believed." We had reached the boathouse entrance. Other guests were arriving, casting curious glances our way. Blake took a deep breath, visibly composing himself. "Can we please not do this now? Can we just get through tonight?" Looking at my son, stressed, conflicted, and clearly caught. Between loyalty to me and to his fiancée's demands, I felt a wave of compassion temper my hurt and frustration. This wasn't entirely his fault. He was navigating difficult dynamics, trying to please everyone, and failing predictably. "All right," I conceded. "We'll get through tonight. But tomorrow, we need to have a real conversation." He nodded. Relief evident. "Thank you. I promise we'll figure this out." The rehearsal dinner was, objectively, stunning. The boathouse had been transformed into an elegant dining space with crystal chandeliers suspended from the vaulted wooden ceiling, tables draped in ivory linens, and centerpieces of white orchids and silver candelabras. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the lake, now golden in the setting sun. My place card located me at a table near the back, with Blake's former college roommate's parents and an elderly cousin of Vanessa's I had briefly met at the welcome reception. Not at the family table, not even at a table with people I knew well. Just another organizational slight to add to the growing list. As I sipped a glass of excellent champagne, at least Patricia's taste in beverages was impeccable, I observed the room. Vanessa was holding court at the head table, Blake beside her looking handsome but somewhat tense. Patricia circulated among guests, the perfect hostess in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. Dr. Morgan chatted with his golf buddies near the bar. The scene was picture perfect, exactly the sophisticated event they had planned. Quite the production, isn't it? I turned to find Josephine Harrington settling into the empty chair beside me, resplendent in vintage Chanel and a spectacular diamond necklace. Mrs. Harrington. I didn't realize we were seated together. She winked. We weren't. I had a word with the maitre d', claimed my old bones couldn't handle sitting near the speakers. She nodded toward the string quartet setting up in the corner. Hope you don't mind the company. Not at all. It's a relief to have a friendly face. I've been watching. They've rather sidelined you, haven't they? The garage situation continuing? I blinked in surprise. How did you— 87 years, dear. Not much happens in this hotel that I don't hear about. The staff are still loyal to the Harrington name. She patted my hand. Don't worry, your secret's safe. Though I must say, I don't understand why it's a secret at all. Before I could respond, Patricia approached our table, clearly curious about my companion. Mrs. Harrington, what an honor to have you join us. Her tone was effusive. I'm Patricia Morgan, mother of the bride. We're so privileged to be celebrating in your family's historic property. Josephine inclined her head regally. The Harrington is happy to host significant events. I was just getting acquainted with Margaret here. Fascinating woman. Patricia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, we're so glad Blake's mother could join us. She turned to me with manufactured warmth. Margaret, I've been meaning to check. Are you comfortable with the special arrangements we made for your accommodations? We so appreciate your flexibility with the room situation. The condescension was unmistakable. In Patricia's world, I was an afterthought. Someone to be managed and marginalized, certainly not an equal whose comfort or dignity mattered. In that moment, standing in a building I legally owned, being patronized by a woman who had relegated me to sleeping in a garage, something crystallized within me. Not anger, though that would have been justified, but clarity. This pattern would not change after the wedding. If anything, it would worsen as Blake and Vanessa built their life together. If I didn't establish boundaries now, I would forever be the inconvenient mother, tucked away in a metaphorical garage whenever I didn't fit their narrative. I looked at Patricia's expectant face, then at Josephine's knowing eyes, and made a decision. The time for patient accommodation was over. Tomorrow would bring a necessary reckoning. The garage has been illuminating, I replied carefully. But I think it's time for a change of perspective, don't you? Patricia looked momentarily confused, but quickly recovered. Of course, whatever makes you comfortable. We're just so grateful for your understanding. She squeezed my shoulder and moved on to the next table, mission of checking on the inconvenient mother-in-law accomplished. Josephine raised an eyebrow. The garage has been illuminating? My dear, you have mastered the art of the loaded statement. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in days. Some lessons can only be learned in unexpected places. And what lesson has the garage taught you? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. I looked across the room at my son, caught in a world determined to erase his origins, to reshape him into something that fit a narrative not of his creation. Then I looked at the property around us, the result of my vision, my work, my persistence. "That I've been hiding my light for far too long," I answered, echoing her earlier words. "And tomorrow, I think it's time to let it shine." I returned to the garage just after midnight. The rehearsal dinner had extended longer than planned, with multiple champagne toasts and an elaborate 5-course meal. Throughout the evening, I'd maintained my composure, making polite conversation with my table mates while observing the dynamics around me. Blake had barely spoken to me, caught in Vanessa's orbit and the endless photos her family insisted on taking. Once, our eyes met across the room, and I thought I glimpsed a flash of regret in his expression. But before I could approach him, Patricia had swooped in, pulling him into a conversation with a distinguished-looking man she introduced loudly as our family's ambassador friend. The garage felt particularly stark after the opulence of the boathouse. The air mattress had been neatly made with fresh linens, Carmen's doing, I suspected, and a small vase of garden flowers now sat on the utility table beside it. The gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In a week where my own son couldn't ensure I had a proper room, a hotel housekeeper had gone out of her way to offer what dignity she could. I changed into silk pajamas and sat on the edge of the mattress, phone in hand. A text from Elaine waited. "Rothwell acquisition proceeding ahead of schedule. Documents ready for your signature. How's the wedding circus? Need rescue?" I smiled at her perceptiveness. Elaine had been with me for 15 years, rising from executive assistant to COO. She knew me better than almost anyone. Certainly better than Blake seemed to at present. "Situation complex," I replied. "May need you tomorrow. Stand by for details in AM." Setting my phone aside, I pulled out my laptop and opened a secure folder labeled Harrington Grand Holdings. Inside were documents I hadn't planned to reference. This weekend, the ownership structure of the hotel, the management hierarchy, the contractual obligations of the property to Sullivan Hospitality Group. I reviewed them carefully, refreshing my memory on specific clauses and conditions. I wasn't planning revenge. That wasn't my style. And despite everything, I didn't want to ruin Blake's wedding. But I did intend to reclaim my dignity and establish clear boundaries. And to do that effectively, I needed to be precise about my legal standing. Around 2 a.m., I finally closed the laptop and tried to sleep. The concrete floor was cold beneath the thin mattress, and the occasional sound of the elevator machinery startled me awake several times. By dawn, I had managed perhaps 3 hours of restless sleep. I rose early, knowing I needed to execute my plan before the day's wedding activities began in earnest. After a quick wash in the employee restroom and a change into a simple but elegant day dress, I made my way to Marcus's office. He was already at his desk, reviewing reports with a cup of coffee. "Ms. Sullivan," he greeted me, immediately standing. "I hope you'll reconsider your accommodations for tonight. This situation is completely unacceptable." "Actually, Marcus, I have reconsidered. I'd like you to prepare the presidential suite immediately." Relief washed over his face. "Of course, I'll handle it personally." "Thank you. And I'll need a meeting room for 9 a.m., something private but comfortable." "The Lakeview Executive Suite is available. It can accommodate up to 12 people comfortably." "Perfect. Please arrange for coffee service and light refreshments." I paused. "And Marcus, I'll need you to deliver some invitations, discreetly." By 8:30, I was settled in the Lakeview Suite, a tastefully appointed room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. The morning sun sparkled on the lake's surface, and in the distance, staff were arranging chairs on the lawn for the afternoon ceremony. In another context, it would have been a perfectly peaceful scene. I checked my watch. Any minute now. Precisely at 8:45, there was a knock at the door. Marcus entered, followed by a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. Ms. Sullivan, this is Richard Harwood, the head of our legal department. Thank you for coming on short notice, Mr. Harwood. I extended my hand. When the owner of the parent company requests a meeting, I make myself available, he replied with a slight smile. Though I admit, this is unusual. Most ownership visits are scheduled well in advance. Most ownership visits don't involve the owner sleeping in the garage, Marcus muttered. Richard's eyebrows shot up. I beg your pardon? A situation that will be addressed shortly, I assured him. Please, have a seat. We have a few minutes before the others arrive. While we waited, I briefly explained the circumstances, keeping my tone professional and factual. Richard's expression grew increasingly troubled. This is completely unacceptable, he said firmly. The liability issues alone are significant, I agreed. But this isn't about legal action. It's about establishing clarity and boundaries. At precisely 9 a.m., another knock came. Marcus opened the door to admit Vanessa's parents, looking confused and slightly irritated. What is this about? Patricia demanded, sweeping into the room in designer resort wear, her husband following in golf attire. We have a very tight schedule today, and this unexpected meeting is quite inconvenient. I appreciate you making time, I replied calmly, gesturing to the seating area. Please join us. We're waiting for just 2 more people. Patricia remained, standing, her expression imperious. If this is about the room situation, I thought that was resolved. We simply don't have space in the main building with all our international guests. Before I could respond, the door opened again. Blake entered, followed by Vanessa. My son looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. Vanessa appeared annoyed, checking her diamond-encrusted watch pointedly. Mom, what's going on? Blake asked. We're supposed to be meeting with the wedding planner right now. This won't take long, I assured him. Please, everyone, sit down. Something in my tone must have conveyed that this wasn't a request. One by one, they took seats around the conference table, exchanging bewildered glances. First, let me introduce Richard Harwood, head of legal for the Harrington Grand, I began. Why is the hotel lawyer here? Dr. Morgan interrupted, looking concerned. Is there a problem with our event contract? Not exactly, I replied. And Marcus Devereaux, the general manager. Marcus nodded politely from his position near the door. Margaret, what is this about? Blake's voice held a note of wariness. I took a deep breath. This was the moment, the line between my old accommodating self and the woman I needed to be moving forward. There would be no going back. I've asked you here to clarify a situation that has become untenable, I began, my voice steady. For the past 2 days, I have been sleeping on an air mattress in the hotel garage because I was told there were no available rooms. I've been excluded from family events, relegated to secondary status in wedding activities, and treated with a level of disrespect that I can no longer accept. Patricia shifted uncomfortably but quickly recovered. As I explained, with Vanessa's family traveling from so far, I held up a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. I'm not finished, Patricia. While I understand the complexities of wedding, planning and the desire to accommodate international guests, there's a fundamental issue that needs to be addressed. I turned to Blake. Son, there's something I haven't shared with you about my business. Blake frowned. What about Sullivan Corporate Housing? Sullivan Corporate Housing evolved years ago. It's now Sullivan Hospitality Group, a company that owns and manages 27 properties across the United States, including luxury resorts, boutique hotels, and extended-stay corporate accommodations. I paused, letting this register. One of those properties is the Harrington Grand Resort and Spa. The silence that followed was absolute. Blake's mouth literally fell open. Vanessa went completely still. Dr. Morgan looked between me and Richard Harwood with dawning comprehension. Only Patricia seemed unable to process the information, her brow furrowed in confusion. I don't understand, she finally said. It's quite simple, Richard interjected smoothly. Ms. Sullivan is the majority owner of Sullivan Hospitality Group, which acquired the Harrington Grand 3 years ago. She is effectively the owner of this resort. Blake found his voice first. Mom, is this true? You own this place? Yes. But why didn't you tell me? It was the question I'd been anticipating, yet it still struck deep. Because somewhere along the way, you seemed uncomfortable with my success. You stopped asking about my work. You introduced me, simply as your mom who ran a small business. When Vanessa entered your life, that discomfort seemed to grow. I chose not to correct the misconception because I thought it made our relationship easier. I looked at him directly. I was wrong. It didn't make things easier. It just made me invisible. Vanessa had gone pale, her eyes darting between me and her mother. So when Mom rearranged the accommodations, she put the owner of the hotel in the garage, Marcus confirmed, not bothering to hide his disapproval. Dr. Morgan cleared his throat. Margaret, I want to assure you I had no idea. This is deeply embarrassing. Wait, Patricia interjected, finally catching up. You're saying you own the hotel chain? All of it? The Sullivan Hospitality Group owns the Harrington chain, yes. I am the founder and CEO of Sullivan Hospitality Group. I kept my tone matter of fact, not triumphant. This wasn't about humiliating them, despite the temptation. Patricia's face flushed deep red. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. Blake was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. The corporate housing company. It became all this? How did I not know? You stopped asking, Blake, and at some point, I stopped volunteering the information. I softened my tone. I'm not blameless here. I should have been more forthright. But somewhere along the line, it became easier to be the mother you seem to want. Unassuming, uncomplicated, unthreatening to the narrative Vanessa and her family preferred. I never wanted you to be invisible, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps not intentionally, I acknowledged. But actions speak louder than words, and the actions of the past few days have spoken volumes. Richard cleared his throat. If I may, there are some practical matters to address. First, Ms. Sullivan. We'll be moving to the presidential suite immediately. Second, there are liability considerations regarding a guest being housed in a non-residential area without proper safety measures. We don't need to pursue that angle, Richard, I interrupted. Gently. I'm not interested in legal action. I simply want clarity and respect moving forward. Dr. Morgan nodded solemnly. Completely understandable. Margaret, please accept my sincere apologies for this situation. I had no idea about the sleeping arrangements or your connection to the property. His apology seemed genuine, unlike Patricia, who sat rigid with humiliation and anger. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice tight. So what happens now? Are you going to cancel our wedding? Throw us out? The question revealed so much about her worldview, the assumption that power must be wielded as a weapon, that success gives one the right to punish. Of course not, I said, genuinely surprised. This is still your wedding day. I want it to be beautiful and meaningful, as every wedding should be. I'm simply no longer willing to be treated as an afterthought in my son's life or at my own property. Blake stood abruptly. Mom, can we talk? Privately? I nodded and followed him to a small adjoining room, closing the door behind us. For a moment, he just stared at me, a mix of emotions playing across his face, confusion, embarrassment, and something that looked like admiration. Why didn't you just tell them who you were from the beginning? Why sleep in the garage at all? Would you believe me if I said I didn't want to make waves? That I thought it was more important to be accommodating than respected? I smiled ruefully. Old habits die hard. For most of your life, I've put your needs and comfort above my own. It's a pattern that served us well when you were growing up, but it's not healthy anymore, not for either of us. He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture so like his father's. I had no idea about the business. When did it get so big? Why didn't you ever talk about it? I tried, at first, but you seemed uncomfortable when I mentioned acquisitions or expansion. You changed the subject. Eventually, I followed your lead. I touched his arm gently. Blake, this isn't about blame. We both contributed to this situation, but it needs to change. I never meant to make you feel invisible, he said quietly. I guess I don't know. When I met Vanessa and her family, they were so polished, so confident in their place in the world. I wanted to belong in that world. And you thought I didn't fit. He looked away, unable to deny it. I was wrong. So wrong. God, Mom, you built an empire while raising me alone. That's incredible. The simple acknowledgement meant more than he could know. Thank you for saying that. What do we do now? The wedding is in 5 hours. Vanessa's probably freaking out. Thinking you're going to ruin everything. I meant what I said. I have no intention of disrupting your wedding, but things will be different moving forward. I won't be sidelined or dismissed by you or by Vanessa's family. I squared my shoulders. And frankly, I think it's time they know who you really are too, not just who they want you to be. He nodded slowly. You're right, about all of it. He hesitated, then wrapped his arms around me in a hug that felt like coming home. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. For a moment, I just held him, remembering the boy who used to climb into my lap with picture books, who made me Mother's Day cards with glitter that got everywhere, who cried on my shoulder when he didn't make the baseball team. My son. Despite everything, still my son. Let's get back in there, I said finally. We have a wedding to prepare for. When we returned to the main room, an uncomfortable silence hung in the air. Patricia was whispering furiously to her husband, while Vanessa sat with her arms crossed defensively. They all looked up as we entered. Blake and I have had a good talk, I announced, and I want to be clear about a few things. First, today's celebration will proceed exactly as planned. I have no intention of interfering with the wedding arrangements. Relief visibly washed over Vanessa's face. Second, I will be moving to the presidential suite, as is appropriate. And third, I looked directly at Patricia. Moving forward, I expect to be treated with the same respect I've always shown to all of you. Dr. Morgan nodded firmly. Absolutely right. Patricia, Vanessa, I think we all owe Margaret an apology. Patricia's lips thinned, but she managed a tight nod. Vanessa looked at Blake, who gave her an encouraging smile. Margaret, she began hesitantly, we had no idea about your business. It's very impressive. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. Blake stepped forward, taking my hand. I have something to say. He addressed the room, but focused particularly on Vanessa and her parents. I've been less than honest about my background. Not dishonest exactly, but I've downplayed things that matter. My mom didn't just run a small business. She built something extraordinary through intelligence, hard work, and persistence. She did it while raising me alone after my dad died. Everything I am, everything I have, I owe to her strength and sacrifice. His words brought tears to my eyes. And I've repaid that by being embarrassed, by trying to fit into a world that I thought was somehow better or more important than where I came from. He shook his head. I was wrong, and I'm done pretending. Vanessa stood, uncertainty in her expression. Blake, what are you saying? I'm saying that I love you, and I want to marry you today. But I need you to see my mom, really see her, for the remarkable woman she is. I need your family to respect mine. and I need to stop hiding parts of myself to make others comfortable." The honesty in his voice was unmistakable. Vanessa glanced at her mother, then back at Blake. Yes, of course." She hesitated, then turned to me. "Margaret, I'm sorry. Truly. This isn't how families should treat each other." Her apology seemed sincere, if somewhat prompted by circumstance. It was enough for now. "Thank you, Vanessa." I checked my watch. Now I believe we all have a wedding to prepare for. Let's focus on making today special for the right reasons. As the meeting disbanded, Marcus approached me. "Ms. Sullivan, the presidential suite is ready whenever you'd like to move your things." "Thank you, Marcus. And please, ensure that Carmen receives a substantial bonus for her kindness. Some people show character when no one is watching. Those are the people worth recognizing." He nodded, understanding completely. As everyone filed out, Josephine Harrington slipped in through a side door, her timing suspiciously perfect. "Well?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. "Did you let your light shine?" I couldn't help smiling. "You were listening at the door, weren't you? At my age, I take my entertainment where I can find it." She linked her arm through mine. "Come, dear. Let's get you settled in your suite. I have a feeling the next few hours will be rather interesting." The presidential suite was everything you'd expect from a luxury resort's premium accommodation. Spacious, elegantly appointed, with panoramic views of the lake and mountains beyond. As I unpacked my modest suitcase in the marble-clad dressing room, I couldn't help reflecting on the contrast between these surroundings and the garage where I'd spent the previous night. But the true luxury wasn't in the high thread count sheets or the designer toiletries. It was in the restoration of dignity. It was in standing in my truth, without apology or diminishment. Josephine settled into one of the plush armchairs in the suite's living room, watching me with those shrewd eyes. "You handled that remarkably well, you know. No shouting, no recriminations, just clear boundaries." "Vengeance has never been my style," I replied, hanging my mother of the groom dress carefully in the closet. "It's exhausting and ultimately unproductive." "Indeed. Though I must admit, Patricia's face when she realized who you were." Josephine chuckled. "That image will warm my heart on cold nights." I smiled despite myself. It was rather satisfying. The question now is, what comes next? After the wedding, after they return from their honeymoon, how will things change? It was a perceptive question, one I'd been pondering myself. I'm not entirely sure, but I know this. I won't go back to making myself small. I've worked too hard, built too much, to be relegated to the background of my own life story. "Good." She nodded approvingly. "You know, I made that mistake with my own children. I downplayed my role in the family business, let my husband take the public credit, all to maintain some outdated notion of what a proper society wife should be. By the time I realized the cost of that choice, it was deeply ingrained in our family dynamic." She sighed. "My son never really saw me as a businesswoman. To him, I was just mother, the hostess, the social director. And now? Now he's surprised when I have opinions about the family trust investments or property management." She shrugged. "Too late to change those perceptions entirely. But you have a chance to rewrite the narrative. Blake seems receptive. Shocked, but receptive." "He's a good man," I said softly. "Misguided sometimes, influenced by the wrong voices, but fundamentally good. Like most of us." Josephine rose, smoothing her impeccable outfit. "I should let you prepare. But Margaret, one last piece of advice from an old woman who's seen a lot of life. Don't make today's revelation a one-time event. This is just the beginning of standing in your power. Keep showing up as your complete self, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." She squeezed my hand and departed, leaving me to reflect on her words as I prepared for the wedding. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. A hairstylist and makeup artist arrived, apparently standard for the bridal party and key family members, though no one had thought to include me in the arrangements previously. Now suddenly I was on the list. I accepted their services graciously, opting for an elegant updo and makeup that enhanced without overwhelming. My mother of the groom dress, which I'd selected months ago, was a floor-length gown in deep sapphire blue with subtle beading at the neckline and waist. Classic, elegant, and appropriate for my role. As I dressed, I added a simple diamond pendant, Thomas's last gift to me before his death, and the pearl earrings I'd worn to Blake's college graduation. At 2:30, a knock came at my door. Blake stood there, handsome in his tuxedo, looking both nervous and determined. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said sincerely. "Thank you. You're quite dashing yourself." I straightened his already perfect bow tie, a maternal gesture that transcended our recent tensions. "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I was going to give this to you after the ceremony, but now seems right." Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm, a tiny house. "To remember our first home," he explained. "Just the two of us, before everything got complicated." The gesture brought tears to my eyes. "It's perfect, Blake. Thank you." He helped fasten it around my wrist, then cleared his throat. "There's been a change to the ceremony, if you're willing." "Oh?" "I'd like you to walk me down the aisle. Properly, not just as an escort to my place at the altar. The way Dad would have, if he were here." The request touched me deeply. "Are you sure? What about the processional order Vanessa planned?" "Vanessa agrees. Actually, it was her suggestion." He looked slightly sheepish. "She's been reflective since this morning. We had a long talk." "I'd be honored," I said simply. "And one more thing." He hesitated. "The separate getting ready rooms arrangement was stupid. I'd like you to come meet the groomsmen now before the ceremony, if you have time." It was a small gesture, but meaningful. An inclusion where there had been exclusion, an acknowledgement where there had been erasure. I'd love that. As we walked together toward the West Wing suite, Blake spoke quietly. "I'm sorry I lost sight of what matters. Somewhere between trying to impress Vanessa's family and building my own career, I forgot who helped me get here." "We all get lost sometimes," I replied. "The important thing is finding our way back." The groomsmen greeted me warmly, several expressing genuine interest in my company, when Blake proudly introduced me as my mom, the CEO of Sullivan Hospitality Group. One of them, an investment banker, asked thoughtful questions about our expansion strategy. Another joked about needing discounts at our properties. It felt normal, natural, the way family interactions should be. As the ceremony time approached, I excused myself to take a moment alone before the procession began. Standing in a quiet alcove overlooking the ceremony site, I watched guests being seated on the immaculate lawn. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, an elegant floral arch framing the lake view, musicians playing softly. It was undeniably beautiful. Patricia was directing last-minute adjustments, still very much in charge but noticeably subdued compared to her previous imperious manner. When she spotted me watching, she gave a slight nod, not warm, but respectful. Progress, of a sort. Dr. Morgan approached, looking distinguished in his formal attire. "Margaret, a moment?" "Of course." I wanted to apologize again, properly. The situation was unacceptable, and while I didn't arrange it directly, I failed to intervene. He seemed genuinely remorseful. "You've raised an exceptional son. Patricia and I haven't always made it easy for you to be part of this merger of families, but I hope we can start fresh." His humility surprised me. "I'd like that, Richard, for Blake and Vanessa's sake, if nothing else. And perhaps for our own." He offered his arm. May I escort you to your position for the processional? As I took my place beside Blake at the head of the aisle, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where I belonged, not hidden away, not diminished, but standing proudly beside my son as he took this important life step. Ready? I whispered as the music changed, signaling the start of the processional. Blake squeezed my hand. Thanks to you, I am. Together, we began our walk down the aisle, between rows of guests who stood in respect. I caught Josephine's eye as we passed. She gave me a subtle thumbs up that made me smile despite the solemnity of the moment. At the altar, Blake kissed my cheek before I took my seat in the front row. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. Vanessa was radiant as she joined Blake beneath the floral arch. Their vows were personal and heartfelt. When they were pronounced husband and wife, I applauded with genuine happiness, hopeful for their future together. The reception that followed was exquisite, everything a luxury wedding should be, with exceptional food, music, and ambiance. But what made it truly special wasn't the extravagance. It was the subtle but significant shift in dynamics. Patricia, though still not exactly warm, treated me with notable respect, even introducing me to several of her friends as Blake's mother, Margaret Sullivan. She owns the Sullivan Hospitality Group. Vanessa made a point of including me in conversations and photos. Blake checked in with me regularly throughout the evening, making sure I was comfortable and included. During the mother-son dance, Blake held me close and whispered, "I'm proud to be your son." I should have said that more often. "It's never too late to start," I replied, my heart full. Later, as the celebration continued under the stars, I found a quiet moment alone on the terrace. The night air was cool and fragrant, with late summer flowers. Music and laughter drifted from the reception tent. From this vantage point, I could see the entire property, the historic main building illuminated against the night sky, the serene lake reflecting the moon, the gardens where guests strolled between dances. It was beautiful, and it was mine. Not just the physical property, but the strength I'd reclaimed, the boundaries I'd established, the authentic self I'd allowed to emerge from the shadows. Josephine joined me, 2 champagne flutes in hand. "To standing in your light," she said, offering me one. I accepted the glass with a smile. "To refusing to be invisible." As we clinked glasses, I realized that the true transformation of the weekend wasn't about revealing my ownership of the hotel. It was about owning my worth, something far more valuable and hard-won than any property could ever be. My eyes found Blake in the crowd, his expression a mix of pride and thoughtful reflection. The young leaders we support through this foundation won't be encouraged to make themselves smaller to accommodate others' expectations. They won't be advised to hide their light to make others comfortable with their shine. Instead, they'll be mentored to lead with integrity, to achieve without apology, and to create success that lifts others rather than stepping on them. I gestured to the harbor view beyond the terrace. Like this view of Boston Harbor, our lives offer both foundation and horizon. We stand on solid ground built by those who came before us, while gazing toward possibilities limited only by our courage to pursue them. The Sullivan Legacy Foundation honors that duality, respecting history while embracing possibility, acknowledging roots while nurturing growth. As I concluded my remarks, the applause was genuine and sustained. People rose to their feet, champagne glasses raised in support of the foundation's mission. But it wasn't the public validation that moved me most deeply. It was the knowledge that I was finally living an integrated life, one where my professional accomplishments, personal relationships, and core values aligned rather than competed. After the formal presentation, the evening transitioned to more casual networking and celebration. I circulated among guests, connecting people with shared interests, acknowledging donors, and welcoming each scholarship recipient personally. Throughout the night, I caught glimpses of Blake doing the same, confident in this environment now that he had embraced, rather than resisted, his connection to it. Near midnight, as the event wound down, I found a quiet moment alone at the terrace. Brailing. The city lights reflected on the harbor's surface, creating the illusion of stars both above and below. The June air was warm, fragrant with flowers from the rooftop garden installations, carrying distant sounds of boats and late-night city life. "Penny, for your thoughts." Josephine joined me at the railing, looking elegant as always despite the late hour. "Just appreciating the view," I replied, and reflecting on how differently I see it now compared to a year ago. "How so?" "A year ago, I would have seen Boston as mainly the backdrop to my business achievements. Now I see it as the setting for a much richer story, one that includes family connections, mentorship relationships, philanthropic impact, a more complete picture." She nodded approvingly. "The difference between success and fulfillment. Many achieve the former. Far fewer recognize and embrace the latter." "I nearly missed it," I admitted, "if not for that garage floor." "Ah, the infamous garage." She chuckled softly. "Perhaps we should bronze that air mattress and display it in the foundation office as a reminder." "Of what?" "How not to treat your mother-in-law." "Of how discomfort can be our greatest teacher when we're willing to learn from it." She patted my hand affectionately. "Though I must say, I prefer seeing you in your proper place rather than tucked away in storage." As if on cue, Blake and Vanessa approached, having completed their goodbyes to the remaining guests. "Mom, the event was incredible," Blake said, genuine admiration in his voice. "The foundation is going to change lives." "Thank you. I'm thrilled with how it's coming together." I included Vanessa in my smile. "And I appreciate your marketing insights on the presentation materials. They made a significant difference." "Happy to help," she replied, and I could tell she meant it. Our relationship had evolved into something neither of us could have imagined a year ago. Not close friendship exactly, but a genuine mutual respect that sometimes even warmed into affection. Those scholarship recipients are impressive. I've already talked to 2 of them about internship possibilities at Luminary. Perfect. That's exactly the kind of connection I hoped tonight would facilitate. Blake checked his watch. "We should probably head home. Early meeting tomorrow." He hesitated, then added, "Sunday dinner this weekend? I found a recipe for Dad's favorite lasagna I want to try." The casual mention of Thomas, of keeping his memory alive through something as simple as recreating his favorite meal, touched me deeply. "I'd love that. I'll bring the tiramisu he always insisted was the only acceptable dessert with Italian food." As they said their goodbyes, Vanessa surprised me with a genuine hug rather than her usual polite cheek kiss. Another small but meaningful evolution in our relationship. Josephine watched them leave, an approving gleam in her eye. Quite a transformation from the couple who relegated you to the garage. They're finding their way. We all are. Indeed. She linked her arm through mine as we moved toward the exit. "You know what I find most remarkable about your journey this past year?" "What's that?" "You transformed a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for authentic living, without bitterness, without vengeance, without burning bridges that matter. To you." Her eyes, wise with decades of experience, held mine. That's rare, Margaret. Most people either swallow the indignity and continue diminishing themselves, or they react with such force that they damage relationships beyond repair. "I had excellent guidance," I acknowledged, squeezing her arm gently. "Nonsense. You had the wisdom to recognize when accommodating others had become self-erasure, and the courage to reclaim your wholeness without apology or excessive drama." She smiled. "Though I must admit, the revelation scene at the hotel must have been rather spectacular." I laughed, remembering Patricia's face when she realized whose property she had commandeered. It had its moments. As we parted ways at the valet station, Josephine clasped both my hands in hers. The air mattress in the garage. Remember it, but don't dwell on it. It was simply the chrysalis. Uncomfortable, temporary, but necessary for your emergence. Her words stayed with me as I drove home through Boston's quiet streets. The metaphor was apt. That uncomfortable weekend in the Berkshires had indeed been a transformative container, constraining and painful in the moment, but ultimately facilitating a profound metamorphosis. 1 year later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, I stood in the sunny kitchen of Blake and Vanessa's Beacon Hill townhouse, helping prepare Sunday dinner while Blake uncorked a bottle of wine. Through the window, I could see Vanessa in the small backyard garden, harvesting late-season herbs for the pasta sauce. The domesticity of the scene would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier, when our relationship had been defined by polite distance and careful avoidance. "You're smiling," Blake observed, pouring me a glass of Bordeaux. "Just appreciating the moment," I replied, accepting the wine. "It's nice, this tradition we've built." He nodded, leaning against the counter. "It feels right. Like something we should have been doing all along." "Things happen in their own time," I said philosophically. "We weren't ready for this before." "You mean I wasn't ready," he corrected gently. "I was too caught up in impressing Vanessa's family, in fitting into their world, too embarrassed by my actual background to appreciate its value. We all get caught in patterns of trying to be what others expect. The important thing is recognizing when those patterns no longer serve us." I tasted the sauce simmering on the stove. "Needs more basil. Your father always said you can't have too much basil." Blake smiled at the mention of Thomas. He would have loved these Sunday dinners. He would have, I agreed, though he might have been surprised by some of the developments that led us here. "You mean the fact that his modest corporate housing company became a hospitality empire? Or that his wife slept in a garage at her own luxury resort?" I laughed, appreciating his ability to joke about what had once been a painful subject. "Both, I suppose, though knowing your father, he would have handled the garage situation differently than I did. More dramatically?" "Much more dramatically," I confirmed, remembering Thomas's protective nature and occasional flair for confrontation. "Let's just say Patricia Morgan would have had a very different experience." Blake grinned, then grew thoughtful. "I've been meaning to ask you something about the business." "Oh?" "I've been thinking about the mentorship committee work. It's been rewarding, more than I expected, honestly. And it's got me wondering about taking a more active role in Sullivan Hospitality Group, not just advisory, but operational." He looked slightly nervous, like a much younger version of himself asking for something important. "Would that be something you'd consider? Me joining the company formally?" The question caught me by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Over the past year, Blake had shown increasing interest in the business, asking thoughtful questions about operations, attending strategy meetings, offering valuable insights based on his financial background. "Are you sure that's what you want? It would mean leaving Meridian Partners." He nodded. "I've been thinking about it for months. Meridian is prestigious, the compensation is excellent, but it doesn't feel meaningful. Not the way your work does." He glanced out the window at Vanessa, then back to me. "Watching you build the foundation, seeing the impact you're having on those scholarship recipients, it's made me reconsider what success really means." I set down my wine glass, genuinely moved by his words. "Blake, I would be honored to have you join Sullivan Hospitality Group, but only if you're certain it's what you truly want, not what you think I want." "It's what I want," he assured me. "I've discussed it extensively with Vanessa. She's supportive. Actually, she's the one who suggested I talk to you about it." He smiled ruefully. "Quite a change from when she thought you ran a small corporate housing company, isn't it?" "Quite a change indeed," I agreed, thinking of how far we'd all come. Vanessa came in from the garden then, a small basket of herbs in hand. "The sage is still thriving," she announced. "And there's enough rosemary to send some home with you, Margaret." As she joined our conversation, offering insights about how Blake's financial expertise could complement the company's expansion plans, I marveled at the unexpected journey that had brought us to this moment. From being relegated to a garage during their wedding weekend to sharing Sunday dinners and business strategies, it was a transformation none of us could have predicted. Later that evening, after a leisurely meal filled with good food, better, wine, and genuine conversation, I drove home through Boston's tree-lined streets. The autumn leaves glowed gold and crimson in the streetlights, a reminder of how seasons change, bringing both endings and beginnings. At a stoplight, I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the same one who had stood frozen in that hotel garage 2 years earlier, questioning her worth and her place in her son's life. This woman carried herself differently, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence that comes from living authentically, from refusing to be diminished for others' comfort. The light turned green, and I continued toward home, grateful for the uncomfortable catalyst that had ultimately led to such profound fulfillment. The garage floor had been hard and cold, but it had provided the foundation for rebuilding. Not just my relationship with Blake, but my relationship with myself. Sometimes, I reflected, we need to hit rock bottom to find our way back to solid ground. Sometimes we need to experience being tucked away in storage to recognize our rightful place in the light. And sometimes, the most unexpected trials turn out to be our greatest teachers, showing us that our worth isn't determined by others' perceptions, but by our own willingness to stand firmly in our truth. As I pulled into my building's parking garage, the irony not lost on me, I smiled at the full-circle moment. This garage, unlike the one at the Harrington Grand, was a place I entered by choice, with dignity intact and identity undiminished. It was a small reminder of how far I'd come, and of the power we all have to transform our most difficult moments into portals for authentic living. The next morning, I arrived at my office earlier than usual, energized by the prospect of Blake joining the company. There was much to consider: which division would best utilize his skills, how to structure his integration to ensure he earned respect rather than resentment, whether a formal announcement would be appropriate or premature. As I reviewed the morning's emails, a message from an unfamiliar address caught my attention. The subject line read simply, "Thank you from the garage girl." Intrigued, I opened it to find a note from Carmen, the housekeeper who had brought me coffee that first morning at the Harrington Grand. "Dear Ms. Sullivan, you may not remember me, but I'm Carmen Diaz, formerly a housekeeper at the Harrington Grand. I say formerly because I'm writing to tell you that yesterday I completed my first semester in the Hospitality Management program at Boston University, thanks to the Sullivan Legacy Foundation Scholarship. When I applied, I didn't mention our brief interaction during your son's wedding weekend. I wanted to earn this opportunity on my own merits. But now that I've successfully completed my first term, I wanted to thank you not just for the financial support, but for the example you set that weekend. I saw how you were treated, and then later learned who you really were. I watched how you handled the situation with dignity rather than revenge. It taught me something important about true leadership and strength. My program advisor has helped me secure an internship at Sullivan Corporate Headquarters for next semester. I hope I'll have the opportunity to thank you in person then. Until that time, please know that your foundation is changing lives, including mine. With deepest gratitude, Carmen Diaz." I sat back in my chair, profoundly moved by this unexpected connection. I had remembered Carmen's kindness, had even ensured she received a generous bonus, but I had no idea she had applied to the foundation program. The thought that my most vulnerable moment had somehow inspired her journey was both humbling and deeply satisfying. Opening my calendar, I made a note to ensure I was available to meet Carmen when she began her internship. Then I picked up the phone to call Blake, eager to share this meaningful full-circle moment and to begin planning his transition into the company. As the call connected, I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, a candid shot from the foundation launch showing Blake, Vanessa, Josephine, and me laughing together on the rooftop terrace, the Boston skyline illuminated behind us. It was a perfect visual representation of what I had learned over the past 2 years. That success without authentic connection is merely achievement, but success built on honest relationships and genuine self-worth creates a legacy that truly matters. "Good morning, Mom." Blake's voice came through the line, warm and ready for this new chapter we would write together. "Good morning," I replied, smiling at the woman I had finally become. Not despite the challenges I had faced, but because of them. "I have some exciting news to share. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us."